Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, that dang old internet, man, you just go on there and point and click, get in there, talk about www.call me,
For some reason or another, you sounded a little taller on radio.
Well, for my money, he's got all the facial characteristics of a criminal.
Now, here's your host, that gravy sopping, crappie flopping, stump jumping, Bible thumping, gun toting, mater growing son of a gun, the backwoods Baptist himself, Pastor Harold Smith.
Welcome to the Backwoods Baptist Podcast. And man, I got a good one for you today. You guys are going to love this. If you want to hear stories of the way it used to be, I've got one of my oldest friends sitting right next to me. I mean, I've got friends that I was friends with older, but I mean, still good friends today. Been good friends for a long, long time. Pastor Jesse Anderson is on the podcast today, and I'll let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself in a minute. But first of all, I just want to say we're coming to you from the Backwoods Book Company. We're open every Saturday from 9 to 5, 522 Main Street, downtown Van Buren, Arkansas. We give away free Christian literature. We give away Bibles, books, gospel tracts, pamphlets. We even give away free advice and black coffee. Everything's free. Freely we receive, freely we give it away. Come by and see us sometime. Today we had a pastor's luncheon. I think we had 13 or 14 pastors here. I didn't get an accurate count. Some of them come early, some of them leave early. But we had a good visit. And we hung around to the very end, and man, when Jesse hung around to the end, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be good. Jesse's not busy today. We're going to be able to record a podcast. So, Jesse, this is Jesse Anderson. Tell everybody what you do. Tell them about your job, where you pastor at, and just give us a basic rundown for people that don't know you.
I will. I actually started in the swimming pool business with a guy that me and Harold know mutually, Danny Burton Pools and Spas. I know that's kind of a shout out, but they're kind of a bulwark of in the Midwest for swimming pools. And hey, I'm proud of them, and I don't mind saying that because I worked for them for 30 years. So you don't work somewhere for that long and not be glad about where you worked. And they were a bunch of Christians, and I got to go to work for him when I first got saved, believe it or not, and I was discipled a lot through my job, and so I learned a lot in that, and that's kind of my job. And going to church is how I actually met Harold. Harold come to work for me, and I knew him in church and knew his parents through church, and then he got a job with me for a couple of summers maybe, and or something like that. And Harold, he is what he is. He's what you see is what you get. He was like that when he was younger, and he's still like that today. And he's one of my good friends as well. And I know I sound like a hillbilly, but I'm from California, and so I kind of did the camouflage, I guess, out here. I turned into an Arkie, and that's fine. But I got kind of in trouble when I was a kid for taking on the accent, but I just kind of took to it. My dad's from Paris, Arkansas, and that's where me and my wife are from. It's from Paris. I was kind of raised up in Paris. My grandparents were there, and so Harold might not even know this, but my dad. The reason we moved back is because my grandpa got shot. Next door neighbor shot him with a 12-gauge shotgun through the back door, and just because he's, it is what it is, and events kind of get you back to a place, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's good. But after I got through in the swimming pool business for about 30 years with Burton's, I kind of went out on my own, and so I've been doing that now for probably about 12, 13 years. And when Dan and my boss, Danny Burton, actually died, he had cancer. He was in Vietnam, and they think the Agent Orange got him as well. And but hey, that is what it is too. And he asked me to take his church, so I've been doing that ever since. But me and Harold's known each other for a long time. I've known Harold's mom and dad for a long time. Had a lot of good fun and fellowship with them too as well. And so I pastor out at Genesis One Family Bible Ministry, which Danny Burton started, which actually started out of a men's Bible study. When I actually moved to Greenwood, Arkansas, it was me, Dan, and one other fella that started it in 1988, and it's been going ever since. It still goes. I do that on Wednesdays, and we have a Sunday service that we do as well. And I've been doing that now for about 14 years because I did it about a year before Dan died, and that's kind of me. So in a nutshell, that's my work is pretty much who I am. I do swimming pool work, and when most people hear me or see me, they don't realize or understand that I'm a pool guy, but I enjoy doing it, and I think I'll probably do that till I probably die.
I think you will too. So to give you some time frame here, the men's Bible study that Jesse was a founding member of, he said started in 88. I started attending that in about 1990. So it was about 2 years old. Still pretty small. It was just a handful of men. And Danny Burton, the guy that started the church that you now pastor, he had a knack for reaching people that nobody else could reach. And he had a strip pit. For those of you who don't know, that's an old coal mine that had filled in with water that had kind of been converted to a lake. They dozed down all the shale banks, and the water was crystal clear, full of fish. And Danny liked to hunt, and my dad liked to hunt. I liked to hunt. And so he had 3D archery targets set up at his house, had like a 3D archery range there. And guys would come out there early and fish in the lake or shoot bows. Some of them come out and ride mules. He had a lot of mules and horses, and there was just all these other things that you did. And then when it was time for Bible study, everybody went inside. And this is the thing that got me. I mean, you got to keep in mind, in like 89, 90, when I started going there, I was probably in the 9th or 10th grade. I wasn't old enough to drive. I'd hitch rides out there. I'd stay with people that lived by, and I can remember riding out there on the back of a dirt bike a few times. But the reason I went is it was all men, and we'd sit around, and Danny would open up the Bible, and we'd start chapter 1, verse 1. We'd read it. He'd discuss it. It was open discussion. Man, you got all kinds of crazy people that would show up over the years with strange views, and, you know, we always ended up in the right place. We always ended up refuting the crazies. We always ended up agreeing with sound doctrine. And you just didn't get this in church, did you, Jess?
Nope. And it was that's the reason it was founded, too, was for unchurched people. People who couldn't go to men's Bible study at their church because they didn't get home at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't get back to the house until 6:30, 7, 8 o'clock, and the Bible study started at 7, and then it would go till all hours of the morning. People don't realize that there were men in there that were that loved God's Word and would study and would come in there, and we would talk about God's Word and bounce it off each other and drill down until we did. We ended up, the Bible will teach you sound doctrine if you'll get in there and you'll drill down and you'll talk about it and discuss it with other brothers, and you'll end up in the right spot if the Bible's your path. You know, if your Bible's your what your main point is, you'll read that scripture, you'll end up at the right spot, and we did. And sometimes it'd take a while, and so I know there's a lot of wives that would call and ask Dan's wife if their husband was still out there, because it's like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
After midnight.
Yeah, and they didn't think that anybody would be out studying the Bible.
You sure he's not at the bar? You know, is he really out there studying the Bible at midnight?
Exactly. And it was pretty easy for me because I just lived across the way, and you know, I could be there in 5 minutes or so. But yeah, I mean, I'll tell you how it was. It was a big game changer when I popped popcorn on my stove and put it in an IGA sack, and we had groceries. You know, we had popcorn. You know, guys would get them a bowl of popcorn or something, or get a handful out of the thing. the community sack, you know. And then next thing you know, we got a popcorn machine, you know,
Yeah.
and
it just grew organically.
It did.
It was just Danny's way of saying, all right, I want to teach a couple guys the Bible, and we'll study the Bible together. And that was you. And in those early days, it was just a handful of people.
it was.
But
he would go after them guys too. He would go like guys who used to come, right, or used to be in church, and he would go to where they were at. I mean, I'm gonna tell you, he would go, and if he found out they were at work, or if they were over here at a roping, or they were whatever, he would go to where they were at and say, "Hey, man, I hear you used to come to church over here. Why don't you go no more?" You know, he'd talk. I mean, it's Dan Burton. You know, I mean,
people that don't know this guy,
Yeah.
he was in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. He was a squad leader. He saw some of the most gruesome hand-to-hand fighting, participated in it. He was a hardened construction guy. I mean, he was a man's man.
Yep. All
the way. And when the Lord got a hold of him and really set him on this path, I was asked to speak at his funeral when he had passed away, and they had it at the Performing Arts Center, the Greenwood High School, and I don't remember how many people there, but it was like well over 1,000 people, like 1,800 or something like that. People attended his funeral. I mean, he was a well-loved, well-liked, but he was a man's man. You know, he was, and I think that's what made him so relatable.
Well, you know, Paul said, if you will, I'm Christ to you. You know, well, Dan was that to a lot of people. You know, he showed Christ in his life, and people could look at the way Dan lived now, not the way he used to live, but the way he lived now, and they could be, and he was an example to a lot of people that you go out, you find these lost souls, you go out and you talk to them, you get them involved, you come, you know, and get them here at your place, and, you know, and you love on them, and you teach them the Bible, and then they're able to go do them things as well.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. I needed mentored.
Yeah.
I needed discipleship. I didn't know nothing. Come here from Sikkim, like they used to say, you know. I didn't know nothing about the Bible. I just knew I was saved.
Right.
So, you know, and I got to sit under that for right at 30 years, you know, and it was a big deal for me. It's been a big part of my life. So to not say anything about him wouldn't be good, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's really where I got to know you. We all went to the same church back then, First Baptist Church at Greenwood. Danny was a Sunday school teacher there. You and your family went there. My family, my dad was a deacon there at the time. I think you were a deacon there, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah, and taught Sunday school there.
I did.
And
22 years.
Yeah, and so we all had the same church family. It was a large church, but we all had the same church family. Do you need to scoot that heater up here
That's
closer?
what I'm telling you, it's colder than Hootie Brown in here now. I'm telling you, it's like I'm all right. You see me over shaking, don't you?
I know.
Yeah, I caught me a little chill, but it's all right. It's
Okay.
good.
I'll fix
but
you
that's
some
how I'm
coffee.
qualified. I've taught. I tell people that's how I'm qualified for the ministry, is I taught 5th and 6th graders for 22 years. So, but I didn't know anything, and that was one of the things that. They needed a bouncer. That's what we call them, bouncers. You know, that's the inside lingo, right? For a 5th and 6th grade boys,
you were the one
need
that
a
gave
bouncer.
him the stink eye for the guy that was teaching the class.
Sat next to him or brought him
Yeah.
over next to you, whatever, right? And kind of loved around on him a little bit, like, you know, kind of, you know what I'm saying? Kind of scared him a little bit, but that's all right. That was good. It was good for him too, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Jesse didn't wear anything but overalls.
Nope.
He had a brand new pair that he wore to church.
Yep.
And then when they got broke in a little bit, they became work overalls, and a new pair was bought for church.
That's correct. Frugal.
Yeah.
That's why I wore them. I didn't wear them to make no statements. Didn't wear them because I wanted everybody to see I was wearing overalls. I wore them because that's what I wore.
Yeah, that's who you were.
Yeah. And
And,
that's who I
and
still
people
am.
would know him. Yeah, they would say, "Oh, that's the guy that wears the overalls."
Yeah.
And anyways, that's how I knew Jesse.
Yep.
And though when Danny, you know, was like, "Hey, if you want to come fishing, you're welcome to fish in my lake." And I mean, nobody ever said you're welcome to fish in my lake, and I did not fish in their lake, you know. So I went out there, I fished all the time, and he was like, "You come out here on Wednesday, we have Bible study." And so the thing that made that, I didn't know the word expositional preaching. I didn't know line upon line, covering a book of the Bible. I didn't know any of that existed. I just looked back over my life, and I was sitting in a room with a bunch of grown construction working. I mean, there were all kinds of people there, but a lot of it was construction men. It was outdoorsmen. It was guys that hunted, fished, did all kinds of blue collar work. And I'm sitting in a room with these men, and we're just talking about the Bible. I can remember going through the book of Romans, and every hard verse in there, Dan would say, he'd read it. He'd say, well, what do y'all think? And you'd have guys that just throw out something, and somebody else would be like, that ain't right, But in the end, and it might take till midnight.
Or next week.
Or the next day, we may come in and say, well, we never really finished that verse last week. So, and everybody would go home and read about it and develop, and we would come back. So when God called me into the ministry, that's 1990. I graduated high school in 93. And so I had about a 3-year time span that I attended that pretty regular. In my high school days when I could drive, even probably into 94, I got married in 95. I had about let's just call it 3 to 4 years that I was pretty faithful in attending that Bible study. And the reason I didn't go to the youth group in high school, I was tired of hanging out with all the kids and hearing the silly little stories. I wanted to go be with the men. And I learned at the men, and I can think back to lessons I learned in that group. I'm talking, this is 30 years later, Jess. 33 years later, I still remember that. I don't remember anything I learned in youth group.
And they probably didn't know what expositional teaching was.
No.
They didn't know that, hey, that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
They said, hey, this is what we're going to do. That way we can't skip over the hard stuff. We're going to find out what this Word of God says, and we're not scared to do it.
So when I got back from Air Force basic training in 1994, I trapped all through the winter of 93 and 94. I went to work as a produce manager in a grocery store, and I hated being inside all the time. I wasn't cut out for the indoors. And Jesse was looking to hire a guy, and I'd ran a wheelbarrow for him. Like when they had to wheelbarrow a bunch of concrete, couldn't get a truck in the backyard. He'd say, hey, you want to work Saturday? And I'd come over there, and I ran a wheelbarrow back and forth full of concrete. So
he wasn't scared to do it either.
I've never been afraid of work.
Yep.
But in 94, the summer of 94, I quit after just a few months of doing the produce stuff. I went to work for Jesse, and I worked for Jesse all that summer and through the winter and into the next summer. And you were building pools.
Yep.
So that's what we did. We built swimming pools. Jesse was
it's hard work.
Yeah, it was hard work. Yeah, you're pouring concrete underground. There's no wind, there's no breeze a lot of times, and you're digging, you're in the mud, and you're pumping water out of the hole. Then 2 weeks later, trying to fill it up so you can hang a liner. Yeah. And but the thing is all during that time, I was around men. I was around Christian men. It was a Christian company that Jess worked for. Danny and his brother David were both devoutly Christian men. They believed the Word of God. And so as you work for Christians, you learn, hey, look, I don't have to be a sissy to be a Christian.
Yep.
Because that's the way a lot of people think. Well, if you're a Christian, you're some kind of, pansy guy. You probably don't do this. Or then you got this other extreme. We're Christian men, rah, like let's go build a fire. I'm like, people don't just go do that. Let's go to.
Oh, but these guys worked for a reason. They worked to make money so that they could tell people about Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's the whole, was the whole premise by how come they worked. And that's why I stayed with them so long too, as well, is because then that allowed me, I worked. So, and this is how I thought of my job for a long time. Is that, hey, I'm helping Dan Burton do what Dan Burton does.
Yeah.
And so by me taking the day-to-day grind away from him, by doing these things, that allowed me, so I was a part of his missionary work. And his missionary work was to reach the unchurched and to get them in church, get them in the Bible study, teach them the Word, that they might know what it was. They know they need a church. They know they need a Savior. They know they need all these things. And then they would come to church. They would join in these things, and the next thing you know, they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, which is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know,
It was. I'll tell you, I've quit a lot of jobs, but there's only one when I quit, I cried. That was when I quit working for you because we had fun every day.
we did.
We had hard work,
We did.
but Jesse and I mean,
Well, we were friends. We had fellowship
yeah,
and good fellowship.
Yeah.
And we liked each other, and we still do.
yeah,
Which is amazing.
And but I mean, we worked hard.
We did real hard.
It wasn't like we just kind of went and drank coffee all day and chummed around. And no, we met early before daylight. A lot of times, get in the car, get to the job an hour away at daylight, and work till the sun went down because it was wintertime. And you're trying to get all you could before the rain hit. And
And it's pick and shovel, wheelbarrow. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's
just,
physical
you
labor.
get in there and work, and when you toil in the trenches together, guess what? You get a good bond. You get
Yeah.
a bond of labor, and when you look back at what you've done at the end of the day, you go, "We did that."
well, you know what helped was
So-
the cassette tapes that I bought for us.
Yeah, got good whistles and them
Yeah.
songs and stuff. Yeah.
So we had a little cassette player. I think they called them a boom box.
Yeah.
Ours didn't have a lot of boom, but it was a box.
Yeah.
And I would stop at the gas station. Of course, you know, I'm 18. I'm in the National Guard. I got a little money coming in. I'm making $7.25 an hour. You know, I'm really kind of rolling in the money back then. My minimum wage was like $4, and so I'm making almost twice that, $7.50 or something. You know, and
Worth every penny.
yeah, and I living with my parents, you know, and all I was doing was running around at night, you know, and blow my money. So I'd walk into a gas station, and, you know, back then they would sell cassettes right up there, like by the cigarettes, you know, up front. You could buy a can of snuff and a cassette tape, and it'd just be like a mixtape of all these different. So I was really into Southern rock back then.
Yep.
Jesse's older than me. I what are you, probably 10, 12 years older than me?
Yeah.
I'll be 50 here in just a month or so.
I'm 62.
Okay,
so-
you're 12 years older than me. So Jesse was in high school when the bands that I liked, they were popular on the radio then. I'm a little, you know, I'm kind of born out of time. So I remember finding this cassette tape called Southern Fried Rock.
Yep.
And
Awesome.
we wore that thing out. It was like a mixture of the Charlie Daniels Band, Leonard Skinner, Atlanta Rhythm Section,
Bunch.
Wet Willie, and I mean, we'd get on the job, string out the extension cord, plug in that, and we would play that. We'd play David Allen Coe.
We'd be singing along.
Yeah, we
with
knew
it.
every word,
Yeah. It was
and we
fun.
had all these little jokes that went along
Yeah.
with the songs,
Had a
and
good time. We'd
and
do the dances with them.
yeah, we had I think we had the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, Jesse and I, every day was like this. And then he was trying to hire a third guy. You know, like, man, if we just had a third guy, well, we'd hire these third guys, and they never knew. They were like, I don't understand you guys. You know, what's with the dance moves? Y'all just stop in the middle of this song, in the middle of Stand By Your Man.
Because it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And so Harold doesn't know it too, but it hurt my feelings when he quit.
yeah.
You know, but I understand that a young man's got to move on. You know, but hey, man, we did. It was you know, I loved Harold and I still do, and so that was an awesome time, and
Yeah,
I was sure glad for it.
The reason that I quit, Jess, is because I was wanting to get married. I had a fiance, and she was like, hey, look, I need insurance.
Yeah.
You know, I need this kind of stuff that
Yeah, I knew that.
digging a swimming pool. I know you knew
Yeah.
that, but our listeners don't, you know. There's 4 listeners out there, and they need to be told. So her mother worked at a wire plant here that had really good benefits, paid me a lot more money, and my wife was like, hey, if we're going to get married, you're going to have to get a better job because you work to death in the summer and starve to death in the winter, and even though you work in the winter, you just don't get a lot done. It's just cold and wet, and it's hard to build pools in the winter.
It is.
And so, anyways, I chose to get to go to work in the factory. Hated it. Worked there for 6 years. Hated every day of it. I just was not an inside person. And then I worked like 3 on and 3 off, or 3 on, 4 off, 4 on, 3 off. I'd have these days off, and because I knew how to work, I knew how to build a swimming pool. I could run a hole if they were digging it. I could read a layout. I could square up the walls. I knew all the
He
basics.
could help.
I could really be a helper, not just a guy that could run a shovel. or a wheelbarrow. And so on those days off, I would work for other pool builders that I knew through you or through Burton's. And so I kind of felt like I had a little bit of a skill or a trade.
Oh, yeah.
And I got out of there. I went to work for Frito-Lay for 3 years. I left there, and a swimming pool wholesale company hired me to be a salesman for them because I had sales experience, I had pool experience, and the largest vinyl liner pool builder in the Midwest, the Burtons, they all considered me personal friends, and they were like, this is a home run hire if you'll come to work for us. And so it was at that time, I knew Jesse. I would see him here and there. We'd talk every once in a while. You came, helped me pour the driveway and the sidewalk to my house when I built it. We stayed friends, but you were working, I was working, and anyway, so during this time, I go back to work in the pool industry, and I start seeing Jesse again because I'm in the same industry, and I'm running into him here and there, and we're still talking about the same old stuff, laughing and joking. And it was during the time that I was a wholesale swimming pool salesman that the Lord began to deal with me about entering the ministry. And so re-enter Danny Burton to the story, the guy that started the Bible study where Jesse now is the pastor. I went to him and I said, hey man, God's calling me to preach. And Dan's little men's Bible study had grown into a full-blown church. I mean, they had constituted as a church. They had services on Sunday morning for, men and women, families, and then they still maintained the men's Bible study, and it had grown exponentially. And so
he got ordained.
Yeah, I mean, he went
some
from
legitimacy. And did some certain things. Yeah, it was neat.
And so when I felt the call into the ministry, this is one thing I knew. I wanted to go verse by verse. I wanted to explain every verse. I didn't want to dodge nothing because that's what frustrated me. In churches all of my life, the pastor would read the Bible and then he'd say something, and I'm like, but read the next verse.
Skip the hard stuff.
Yeah, or I'd say, well, why don't you deal with that one that nobody understands?
Yep. That's what we're supposed to do.
They never did that.
No.
And so I said, if God's calling me to preach, then this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this verse by verse thing. So I went to Danny, and he was at work. I went in there, and I said, hey, God's calling me to preach. He said, hey, that's great. And he asked me a few questions, and he said, well, how are you going to do it? And I said, well, I'm going to do it the way you did it. It won't be it won't always be as interactive. Dan would allow a lot more. I said, there's going to be times I have to preach and going to be times I have to be, I want to study. I want people to learn like I learned when I was with you. And he said, well, I found this guy and he believes just like us. And I said, what? He goes, I found this guy, and believe it or not, the guy believes just like us. Of course, we didn't know what we believed. We just knew we believed the Bible, and we'd read through it and was going verse by verse. And I said, who's that? He said, the guy's name's John MacArthur.
Yep.
And I said, doesn't he have like a radio program or something? And he goes, yeah, like real early in the morning. He said, but he's got this study Bible. And he said, man, you're going to be surprised. He goes, it's all the stuff we talked about it when we went through Romans, when we went through Ephesians, when we went through Matthew. Yep. He said, all the conclusions we came to, he said, that's what this guy already believed.
Yep.
And I thought, well, how strange, because I'd never heard anybody that believed what we all had come to the conclusions of.
Yep.
We came to it through just going verse by verse through the book.
Practical teaching and learning. Yep.
And so anyways, Danny bought me a MacArthur study Bible and like 4 or 5 MacArthur commentaries, like on Ephesians and Romans 1 and 1 through 8, 9 through 16. So when I became a pastor, my entire theological library took up about 18 inches of one bookshelf, and I had an office full of bookshelves. But that was all I had, and I read them, but I didn't rely on them. What I more or less did was what I learned to do in those studies was read it. Now, what does that mean? Now, if you were going to object to that.
Yeah, who's he talking about? I mean, who is this? Who does this apply to? I mean, you would go through all these things. Who's he talking to? And when you would get through all those things, you'd come out with the right answer.
Yeah.
And, things that they teach you at a lot of these schools, some of them don't, but some of them do. we actually did just come into it naturally.
Yeah.
So
Through
I
the
would say
text.
that's the Holy Spirit,
Right.
leading us. We were led that direction. So we needed a teacher. So the teacher was there teaching us all
Yeah.
along. We didn't realize.
Well, we didn't have somebody going, this is what that really means. Now believe this, let's move on.
Yeah.
Instead, what we had was somebody saying the exact opposite.
Yep.
Well, it can't mean that. And we're like, well, prove it.
Why can't it?
Why can't it?
Yeah.
And like, well, we've been told all along that's wrong. And I'm like, well, it says here and it says there. And we actually learned what we learned by defending what the Bible said
did.
against objection
And it was like that every Wednesday night.
every Wednesday night.
And it was like that. I mean, you would think that 20 or 30 guys in a place about as big as this right here, and it got hot a few times, but it didn't ever get mean,
No.
and
Passionate, but not
passionate.
not ticked
they
off.
contended for the faith, or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, But we had some guys in there that sometimes had to leave, and that's okay too. And but it was a good, and we learned in that even how to deal with people and how to deal with people who didn't believe exactly like we believed. And,
Right.
we were talking about that at pastors, lunch today, and I think that at Jeff Noblet, when we went to a deal down in
And Muscle Shoals.
Shoals, he said, preacher's grace ought to have a little.
Yeah.
And, so I think, that when we do that, when we got sanctified out of some stuff we didn't understand or didn't believe, God showed us grace and mercy and until we got to that spot. And that's what happened in that men's Bible study. We showed each other mercy and grace and, and we got through it. And I think it's just, I just think it was an awesome time in my life, and it's still paramount in how I preach and how I teach today.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I'm not the best preacher in the world, but I want to do what's good and what's right. And the best part of my church is my people at my church.
Yeah.
And because they love Jesus. And one of the main things I tell them is that we're learning this for a reason, and the reason is so we go tell somebody else about it.
Having a practical application for it. It's not just some dry, dusty doctrine that we say, hey, look what we know.
Yeah, that don't mean nothing.
Yeah, and
there's lots of books out there
Yeah.
that have all that information in there that don't know anything, but unless you use it.
Having a room full of, like you said, 20 or 30 men that work for a living, and we're sitting here talking about something, and they're like, well, why does that matter? And then you have to go, well, why does it matter? So I would say the bulk of my preaching, I learned from going, what does it say? Who's he talking to? Why does it matter?
Yep.
And where else can I see it?
Yep.
And then what might appear to disagree with it. And when you start looking at that, and you were getting it. I can remember just as like a 16-year-old boy in that room, I would see some grown man say something, and I'd go, well, that's not right. And I'd had my Bible out, and I knew a couple passages that, and
sometimes people would say, like sometimes the young kids would say something, hey, well, that don't sound right, or that's not what I've always been told, or that's not this, or that's not that. And Dan, he was never one to say, don't say nothing.
Yeah.
Because you're young.
Yeah, you're 16 years old, son.
Yeah.
Shut up. He never said that.
No, it was like, come on.
Yeah.
Give me some more of that, and so that taught those youngsters in there not to be quiet.
Yeah.
And I that's something you got to learn.
Yeah.
And I think I think sometimes as pastors and we're teachers and we got responsibility, I think sometimes we forget some of that sometimes too, that, hey, we need to foster that inquisitiveness and things too with our, it's easy for us to say, no, this is what you need to believe.
Yeah.
Well, for it to stick, they got to believe it.
Yeah.
And not that just so-and-so told me.
Well, I think seeing it modeled, in men. And so, here I am now, I'm 31 years old. I'm preaching, and I ended up pastoring my first church. And it wasn't long after that. I mean, I think I've been in the ministry 19 years. You've been pastor out there for 14. Mm-hmm. So 5 years later, Danny is diagnosed with brain cancer, and that did not take long.
Nope, about a year.
About a year.
Which I supplied during that time, too.
Yeah.
So I've actually been doing it almost 15.
So then you and I began talking more and more and more because I was still, I mean, even though I'm now 36 years old, if I'm doing the math all right, I'm still only 5 years in the ministry, no formal training, don't know anybody. You're still doing pool work and
But
preaching.
that was 5 years longer than I'd been in it.
Yeah.
I needed advice, too. You know what
And-
I'm saying?
yeah.
In the ministry
Yeah.
part.
And so that's when I think, you know, even though we stayed friends and stayed in communication and had good visits and, you know, enjoyed each other, I really think since you've been in the ministry for the last 14, I've been in the ministry, I guess, 19, I don't remember, maybe 18, I don't know, something like that. I've been in ministry 18 or 19 years. Anyways, maybe it's 18. Anyways, during that time, we've talked more on the phone. You were driving up and down the road. You weren't building pools for a while. You were traveling. You were like a construction supervisor.
yeah.
You were managing crews. So you'd be on the road driving a lot. I'd be in the office a lot. And you'd call me and you'd say, hey, man, I'm going through, you know, 1 Corinthians or whatever.
Yeah.
You ever read this? And, you know, I'd be like, no, I never have. And I'd get out and read it. And I'd be like, you know, and we did a lot of that back and forth.
Yep. And that's what we did at Bible study on Wednesday nights too,
Yeah.
you know, and that's what I see. I mean, there, you think about it, you had really 4 preachers come out of that. You had Dan, he came out of that men's Bible study. You can say that he came out of it or since he started it or whatever, but I say Dan come out of it. He become a pastor,
Right.
right? Harold Smith, Jesse Anderson, and we had one other guy
Yeah.
that actually did as well, and all pretty successful at doing that.
Well,
you know,
I think that core base right there, if you're going to stand before 30 men and say what you're going to believe, you better have your hammers cocked. You better have your powder tamped down. It better be
Yep.
dry. And you better have a good cap on there.
because it'd be on sometimes.
Yeah.
You'd have to defend yourself.
You got to walk in there.
Defend
Not
that word.
Yeah, a lot of preachers today don't ever have to do that. They get up in the pulpit, they say a few things, a couple things are a little off, and people are like, huh, what? Well, overall, it was a good message.
Yeah,
Out there, you don't get the luxury of just going blah, 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 blah. They're like, whoa, 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 stop
on.
right there.
let's go back two
Yeah.
verses here. Yeah, or there's one guy over there that hadn't been listening to nothing anybody said. He's been reading because of what he heard when he first got there, and he's been studying something for 15 or 20 minutes. He goes, hang on just a second. Do you guys care if we talk about this thing? You know,
Yeah.
I've kind of looked at this. This is what I think, and it would be like, man, that guy's right. You know,
On
why didn't
second
we
thought.
think about that?
Yeah, on
you know?
second thought,
Yeah.
I never really considered
Yeah,
that.
and he like got you hate to say it's a revelation of God, but the Holy Spirit, you know, did something.
He connected all the dots.
He did, and you know, somehow he did that. Now you can say however you want to, but somehow he did it, and then we would get the benefit of that.
Yeah.
Of you get 30 guys in there that love Jesus and want to know what the Word of God says
And that's the key.
without an agenda,
Yeah.
right? And you'll come to the right conclusion.
But they've got to love Jesus.
They gotta love Jesus.
Because if they don't, they're not going to love the brethren, and it's going to be dogmatism. It's going to be, you know, y'all
Name
are all,
calling.
yeah, you're all
Yeah.
a bunch of idiots. I'm the only one that knows anything.
Yep. And that's what happens, and we've all had to deal with it, and
Yeah.
you know, and I don't like it.
I don't
And,
either.
You know, and so I'd rather everybody get along.
Yeah.
And you know, and,
And
know that we're all lovers of God,
Right.
and we all want what's right in the end.
Yeah.
You know, and hey, I want to listen to them, and I hope they want to listen to me, and hopefully we can come to some good conclusions.
Yeah, right. Right.
You know.
And I really think, you know, I really think that's the beauty of God calling different guys to pastor. You know, I'm glad everybody doesn't preach like John MacArthur. As sharp as he is, I've never been a fan of his preaching. I thought he's a smart guy, but his preaching just doesn't really, if I was to pick a preacher, it wouldn't be him.
Oh, but I sure don't mind when I get stumped to go see what he says about something.
Right. And
Yeah.
other men as well. But
Yes, sir.
I guess what I'm getting at is your style of preaching. I've heard you preach on a number of occasions, and I've enjoyed every sermon you've ever preached. But look, your background, your teaching, your instruction. You didn't go to seminary. I didn't go to seminary. But our minds are wired different. Even though you and I are a lot alike, we have a lot of things in common. We share a lot of same common values and beliefs.
Yep.
Your approach to a text of Scripture and my approach, two different things.
God's got different guys for different things.
That's
how
right.
I looked at it.
That's right. And that's why I don't think you ever teach preaching. Yep. I think it's either something that God gave you or he didn't.
Yep.
And if your preaching looks just like somebody else's, or you're trying to be like somebody else, you're not doing it right.
Which I've tried, and I got good advice when I first went out there. I mean, I went to take the place of a guy who was bigger than life.
Right.
Right, at a place where he was bigger than life. And I got some good advice from my preacher, and he told me, he says, I took the place of a guy who'd been at my church for 20-something years, right? And he said, I'll tell you what. He said, you're Jesse Anderson. You're not Danny Burton. You need to be Jesse Anderson.
That's right.
And that was really good advice, and that helped me out. And I tried to do a lot of things where, what you'll do is when you do become a pastor and a preacher and you've got kind of a clean slate like I did, you'll get a lot of advice on how to do stuff. And what I found out is a lot of it's well-meaning, and for them it's right, but for me where I'm at, it's not.
Yeah.
And and it's not doctrinal. It's not any of that. It's just the way you deal with some of the people and those kind of things. Just the
handling
little
personalities.
Stuff. Yeah, and it's not the same. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
There's a reason somebody's coming to a little church that's out in the woods that nobody knows where it's at.
Yeah.
Except that somebody told them, hey, you go out here, they teach the Bible out there, and it's welcoming for big families. We're all in one congregation, big kids, little kids, old people, young people, middle age, so you got everybody in there. And
y'all eat a meal every time you get together.
And we have a meal afterwards, a fellowship. And that's the way Dan started it.
Yeah.
Dan used to sit when he taught, for a long time, and I was there 13 years. And I got some older folks. Well, I had 4 or 5 of them tell me they couldn't hear, right? So they were getting where they couldn't hear. And so, you get kind of worried about some of that stuff, like, okay, do I quit sitting? That's something that he's done that people really like, that's how they think, hey, this is how you're supposed to do it. Whatever. And I know a lot of you guys out there that are preachers are going, what? He sat? What? But that's how he did it. And he wanted it to be not formal, and and like that, more close, like you were talking to, like we did at Ben's Bible study, and
right.
And that. But so now I preach behind a pulpit, and there's something different about when you preach behind a pulpit. Yeah. And I think it was the right thing at the right time to start preaching, and people can hear you better. And I think it lends a little bit to your authority. I know that sounds weird, but
it does.
Yeah,
it does.
And I think at that time it was the right thing to do. And and I know that sounds that's simple for a lot of people, but I hear these stories. You hear the stories about somebody, man, he wanted to paint the room a different color. Next thing you know, you're out on your ear.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? And, stuff like that. So, boy, you bring a pulpit in here, things are going to go south. But, you do what you're supposed to. You ask people, you tell them, and you get one give to you. And there you go.
You pray about it. You think about it. If the Lord's leading in that direction, you do it. But,
I know I kind of got off there a little bit, but still, it's just part of what happens. And part of what ministry, everybody's ministry is different.
Yeah,
and,
every church is different. The dynamics of the people are different.
Yep.
And you don't deal with every person the exact same way.
You don't. And you get good advice. I'm telling you, I've been able to give good advice. I've had people call me, and I've been able to give good advice because a lot of times I've got good advice on how to deal with things. Like I had a guy tell me one time that he felt like I was doing something. Man, I didn't know how to handle that. He felt that's not what I was doing. But he felt like that. You actually, I think, told me. He said, "What Jess, you can't change how a guy feels.
Yeah.
You know, how do you change? That's how he feels.
Yeah.
You know, and so and basically how I handled it is I let him get that off his chest. I let him, you know, complain and gripe, and because he felt that way.
Yeah.
You know, I made him feel stupid, and then after we got done, and he'd got mad at me a little bit, and after we got done though, I said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You feel better?" And he goes, "What?" He said, "I kind of do." And I said, "Okay, now." Right? Now I'm going to tell you how I feel. Right? And then we can both know how we both feel. Right? And so then I was able to explain to him where I was coming from, what was going on, you know.
Yeah.
And so then at the end of it, I knew how he felt, and I appreciated it.
Yeah.
And he knew how I felt, and he appreciated it, and we're still friends today.
Yeah, right.
You know, that's how it works. You get good advice, you know.
Yeah.
But it's all different. Everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
And some guys you've got to use a firm hand with. You've got to be like, hey, that's enough. Other guys, you want to be more calm. And really, it's knowing your people.
Yep.
It's knowing who you're dealing with. It's knowing your congregation. It's knowing, you know, where they're coming from. And look, I'm not talking about church discipline. If you need to discipline someone, go through the process of Matthew 18, 1 Corinthians 5. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how you respond to situations, and that's what makes a good pastor, is handling the situation in the proper way, and
not ruining the person.
Yeah.
Because why? Because you love them.
Yeah.
Right? And so you want the best for them. If you got to humble yourself, if you got to eat a little crow for a little while, guess what? The opportunity's coming later.
Yeah.
Where you'll actually get to talk to them and mentor them and talk to them about what the Bible says about it. But you know, there's something about, you know, when there's people that are crying, you cry with them, you know, mourn with them.
Yeah.
And
rejoice with the ones that are rejoicing.
Exactly.
And some people are, I don't know the right way to say it. They're more they're more sentimental. They're more temperamental. They're not temperamental. They're more sensitive. You know that one cross word, you're going to really hurt them. Whereas another guy, he's not hearing you unless you've been like, "Hey, dummy."
Yeah.
You know, you kind of have to get up there. If he's been in the military, you know, he's been yelled at for no good reason.
Or they're from up north.
Yeah.
If you don't get in their face a little bit and kind of, you know, talk to them like they're talking to you, maybe not cussing or something at them, you know, because we don't do that. But still, you got to kind of holler around at them a little bit, and they like it.
Yeah, it's a different culture. It's a different expectation.
They think you care about them when you do
the
that.
little old lady in church, you're not going to talk to her the same way you're going to talk to the, 30-year-old punk kid knows everything, It's just different. And knowing that churches are constructed differently, made differently. Now, look, there may be things in there that need to be fixed, but those things need to be fixed in the proper time at each church. There's a time, like you said, there's a time to bring in the pulpit, and there's a bad time to bring it in.
Yep.
You got to know where that church is at the time.
Yeah, I had a guy tell me after I'd been there 7 years, he goes, "You know, I was really worried about you. I didn't know if you were going to stick around."
After 7 years?
Yeah, after 7 years. He said, "I think you might be all right." You know what I'm saying? So you just start getting these guys to start loving you. You might love them as your sheep, as a pastor.
Right.
But they have to realize that, hey, you got their best interest at heart, and you do that by your actions and by, by what you do for them and different things.
Yeah, I was having a conversation just the other day and with another pastor, and that's exactly what we were talking about was, he said, "Harold, you get away with a lot more in a church than the average pastor does." He said, "You can say things, people don't get mad at you. You can do things, and people follow you." He said, other people get fired for that. And I said, "I hear that a lot." And he said, "I'm going to tell you why you hear it." And he said, "Because you love the people, and they know you love them."
Yeah, you're the friends.
He wouldn't be telling me this if he didn't love me. He wouldn't be saying we need to go here if it wasn't the best thing for us. He said, when they know that you love them, and he said, you can't just say, "Hey, I love you." He said, everywhere you've ever pastored, you cooked their dinner, you give them Christmas gifts, you doing all this, you're sitting in their home, you're talking to them, you're friends with them. You're not just their pastor, you're a friend. And he said, when you develop that kind of relationship and then you say, hey, man, this is out of line, they go, oh, okay. Because they know that you wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't so.
Yep.
And I really think that's kind of what's missing in a lot of the pastors today. They're not invested in their people.
Yep.
They're not, they don't have that kind of commitment. They're not doing that. I mean,
I don't mind people calling me because when they call, I'm happy to see their number on there that I can talk to. You know, if they got something to talk to me, my heart don't drop. You know, when I have somebody call me, I'm what's going on? You know, he's going to tell me something that one of his kids did, or you know, something like that.
Oh, here we go again.
Yeah, it's not like that.
Right.
No, it's because why? Because they love me and I love them.
Right. That's right.
And they know I want what's best for them. And hey, if it is a question or if it's something like that, they know they can count on a good answer. I'll think about it, or if it's something right off I already know about, then I can give them a quick answer. You know.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing it. I didn't think I would, you know.
Yeah.
This is my first pastorate, my only pastorate that I've ever had, you know. And when I first took it, I felt the call of Dan Burton, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you were
when Dan asked you to do something, you wanted to do it. Why?
Hey,
Because I worked for him for so many years.
And he was your friend. You lived across the street from him for years, you know?
Yeah, our kids carpooled together, and I mean, you go on, you know, and he taught me, and he blessed me, and he helped me build my house. I helped him build his house.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
You know, we just go on, you know.
So when a guy says, hey, I need you to help me out, you say, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. And but then I realized that God called me to this spot. Like Dan called me, sure.
Yeah.
But God has called me to be where I'm at. I mean, you know, I heard a lot of people tell me after I decided, hey, yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and at least fill in for now. You know, they're all smiling and giggling. We knew you was the guy for the job, you know, and all that. You know, they didn't know that. You know,
No.
they might have thought they did, but
only the Lord knew.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, so but I've enjoyed it, and it's something that I didn't think I would enjoy doing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I'm gonna be tied down. Oh, I'm gonna be this, or I'm gonna be that. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if that's what a lot of people deal with. You know, I was older. I mean,
yeah, I'm
so
31, so you.
So I mean, I was 50.
Yeah,
you
you're
know,
like 50.
I'm like 50. You know,
almost 50.
Yeah, before I was gonna be a.
Yeah,
know,
but you weren't like in the Hell's Angels up until you were 50. You were a deacon. You were teaching. You were teaching Sunday school.
Yeah.
You were working in a church.
I was.
You just wasn't working in the capacity
I
of
didn't
a
get
pastor.
saved till I was 18 and was going to get married, you know, and I didn't realize anything. I had guys through high school that I remember now, you know, that would talk about Jesus, and now I realize, hey, I got to hear about that for a reason. You know, God's preparing me. He's doing these different things. And so when you see that kind of stuff, and, you know, we can look back, and it's all 2020, you know. You can look back on your life and say, okay, God was in all this all the time, you know, and got me ready, got me prepared. I know we're kind of going long. We can talk about
we're not
lots of stuff.
We're not
I
going
don't
long.
mind. I can keep on going. So.
You don't have to be home before dark, do you?
I don't.
Okay.
I got lights, I think, on my rig. I think
If you don't, I got a flashlight and hold out the window.
Yeah, I've probably done that before, actually. So on a bicycle or something, or a motorcycle that we hop together sometime, me and my brothers, you know. Who knows? But, yeah, hey, you know, the path that you get to somewhere sometimes leads through a lot of places. But when you look back and you go, you know, God's had a plan for me. And, and you've been a part of that, and I've appreciated that friendship. And of course, you know, we don't get to talk about it a lot. I'm sure you talk about it on here, but you know, that's kind of a lot of your ministry is you get a lot of these pastors that are friends and, you know, become friends, and you introduce them to people who are regular folks. You know, I feel like I'm regular folks, you know, that they might know people who are regular. A lot of these guys that you see, and we talked about a little bit today, but a lot of these guys you see, they don't know anybody else.
No.
They know.
I mean, other than their church, they don't really have any.
And they don't know them people either, some of them. You know what I'm saying? They don't know them like as a friend. They know them as a pastor, you know. And that's just not the way we're geared.
No.
You know, that if I'm the pastor, all right, but that's just something you might put on there, you know.
I never would have said this,
responsibility.
but I've been told this so many times it must be true. People have said, Harold, you're basically a pastor to pastors.
Yeah.
You're a friend to pastors. So, you know, people say, well, what do you do? I said, well, basically, I spend the whole day talking to my friends,
Yeah.
you know. And it's true. I mean, you call me regularly. I
I
call
do.
you regularly.
Yeah.
A lot of times we don't talk about nothing.
Oh.
But
How's your garden growing? Oh, it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and
whatever.
so we just have just regular old conversations. But that also keeps these channels open when someone's like, man, I like tomorrow. I had a guy that couldn't be here for the pastor's lunch today. He called me. He said, hey, Thursday, could I sit down with you? I got some stuff I want to bounce off of you. He wouldn't want to bounce that off of me unless we were friends and he trusted me.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
100%.
And so if you're going to be of service to your fellow pastor, you've got to be friends with the fellow pastor.
Yep.
And the Lord's not given me money or wealth or even good looks, but he's given me a whole lot of friends.
Yep.
And because I have a whole lot of pastor friends, I have a ministry to those friends, whether I want to admit it or not. And I didn't realize this, Jess, until I told somebody. I said, they said, what'd you do? I said, man, I didn't do anything today. And they said, nothing? You sat around all day? And I said, I had 9 phone calls. And they're like, really? What was something wrong? And I said, no, not really. Just 9 preachers called. And they're like, 9 preachers? What's going on? And I'm like, all nothing? And they're like, you mean you talked to 9 different pastors? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, no, you didn't. I said, yeah. I started naming off some of them. They're like,
It's snowing in North Carolina. It's raining.
and so they were like, well, what's going on? So some of them just wanted to brag. Some of them wanted to cry. And some of them just wanted to talk.
Yep.
And I'm like, isn't that normal? Isn't that what all preachers do? And they're like, I've been in the ministry 38 years. I ain't talked to 9 preachers since one of them died.
Yep.
And everybody called to make sure. And I'm like, oh, really? And they're like, how often does that happen? And I'm like, not scheduled. I mean, it could happen 2 days in a row or 3 times a week. And that's when I was like, this is not normal.
No, and I've been stumped. I mean, before in a scripture had something come up. Hey, I'm gonna tell you, I've learned to say I don't know pretty regular.
Bingo.
And I'm not afraid of it, you know, anymore. If I don't know something, I'm not going to try to make something up, and then I'll have egg on my face and have to explain it to, 15, 20, 30 different people.
Yeah.
Why I said what I said, that's a lot worse than saying I don't know.
Right.
And so I've learned to do that. And I said, but what I will do is what I've learned is I'll find out.
Yeah.
Right. And so
I'm not a smart man, but I know some smart men.
It's not what you know, it's who you know sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, and it's been the same way for me in the swimming pool industry. And so, and I was pretty good at what I did in the swimming pool industry. A lot of people know me, and I can call a lot of those people if I have a problem on swimming pools, right? And so, and talk to them and say, hey, this is what I got going, hey, what have you done? And they'll tell me, right? And I'll say, well, that's what I needed to know. Well, it's no different in the ministry. I'll call somebody, hey, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. Well, I don't know how to do that, but old so-and-so down here just had this happen, or he's been educated in this.
Yeah.
Let me give you to him.
Right.
And talk to him, and they can help your people.
But that's where friends come in. You're not going to these, like in the pool business, those are reps. Or those are people that maybe you've met through the pool industry.
friends.
Other guys
They're
that
friends too.
they've built this kind of pool, But
Yeah.
in the ministry, if you don't have some kind of network of friends to say, hey, man, how would you handle this? Because I've never experienced this, And
You're not Elijah in a cave.
no, you're not. We have cell phones, we can call and talk to somebody.
Pretty easy. You got to use them, though.
Yeah.
And I had a good friend or buddy of mine tell me one time, if a guy's your friend, you're not the only one doing the calling.
Yeah.
And that was you.
Yeah.
And you know that. And so sometimes if you realize that, hey, you've been doing all the calling, are them people really your friends?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you got to know who your friends are too.
Yeah, that's right.
And you learn that pretty quick when you quit calling them.
Yeah.
And then they don't call you.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
true. And I guess that's, it's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. If you're really, truly going to open yourself up to be friends with people, then it's really going to open up the amount of time it's going to take you to maintain that level of friendship with all these level of friends.
100%.
You know, and
a guy's got something like a Danny Burton, who's got a lot of demands on his time, who's a mentor, not just to me,
right,
but to a lot of other folks. And, you know, it took me a little while to understand or realize this. And when I become a pastor, that's when it really kicked in. Is like, he didn't have extra time. And he didn't have all this extra time to be talking to me about, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, this is what happened out here, yada, yada, yada. But what he would do is he'd be in there studying in the hooch, you know, back here in our little spot where I got to stay out there. And man, it was some of the best times of my whole career being in there with Dan. We wouldn't be talking to nobody, you know, or whatever.
The hooch, for those that don't know, is a portable building out behind Burton Pool's office where Dan had his own outside office, and then Jesse shared that office. And you were probably the only guy in the entire company that could have shared an office with him.
Well, I don't know about that, but hey, I did.
Well, no,
and
you
I
do
did it
too.
for a
No,
long
there's
time.
nobody else in that company that.
Because I wasn't there all the time.
Well, they wouldn't have been comfortable with him, and
They
he wouldn't have
probably
been
wouldn't have.
comfortable with them.
Yeah, and they called it the hooch because he went to Vietnam, and that's what they called the little hooches out there, where the grass huts and all that. So
Yeah.
he called it the hooch. So that's how I got that name. But we would do that. But he'd be over there studying for Wednesday night or something, right? And I'd come in. Of course, I was out looking at jobs, whatever. And I'd come in, and I'd have something that's bugging me, or, you know, and hey, here's the boss, you know, you get to actually talk to him. And I wouldn't want to talk to him. You know what I'm saying? It's like, man, he's studying. I don't want to talk to him. But I would say something, and he would give me a little gruff answer right off the bat, you know. And then he would think about it for a second, and he would put his stuff down.
Yeah.
And he would turn and say, hey, this is, you know, blah, 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 or whatever.
Yeah.
And we would talk about it, and he would give me, you know, 10 or 15 minutes, you know, and it could have took, hey, yeah, no, that's what you do, boop, and we'd be done. No, he knew I needed some of his time.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I learned that when people call you, they're wanting some of your time.
Yeah.
And if you love people and
You're
want
going
to
to take the time.
you're going to take the time
Yeah.
to do it. And that's what you do,
Yeah.
you know. And,
Hey, I've got
and you
pastors.
do it all the time.
I call them. They don't ever call me back. You know, I text them. They don't even respond.
Yep.
They may call me back 2 weeks later. I understand being busy, and I understand you forget I called. I get it.
Yep.
But there's other guys in the area that are pastors that,
You know they're not doing nothing.
no, they're not doing nothing. And, you know,
But they don't ever call.
they never
and-
call me. Or if they are calling me, I'm like, well, they
they
need
want
something.
something.
Yeah, and it ain't my time.
And they hate to shoot the breeze.
Yeah, they want something from me.
Yeah.
And so I say all that to say that was the good thing about Danny Burton.
Yep.
He was open to people, as many people as he knew, you know, being the owner of a very large, successful business, partners in that business. There was only a handful of people that had
Yep.
really close access with him during those times. My dad was one of those guys because he and my dad traveled and hunted together.
They did.
And my dad, Danny would, I mean, when they traveled, he'd put in them Western books on tape, you know,
Oh,
like
man.
Louis L'Amour books, be like 9 hours of the Sacketts or something, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Dad would want to talk. My dad's a talker. He's like me. Dan's not a talker. You know, wants to drive. He'll drive 20 hours a day, but he wants to just listen to that book on tape.
Pull that cowboy hat
Yeah.
over his eyeballs, cut out the sun, and get down the road.
Yeah. And so Dad said, he's trying to talk, and Dan's trying to listen to the book. And Dad said, hey, look, we're going on this trip together. So I'll let you pick. Do you want to listen to the book on the way out there? Or do you want to listen on the book way back? Because one way we're going, I'm talking. Dan, you know, he goes, we'll listen to the book on the way out. This is the funny thing. You may have heard this story. They got to Colorado. They killed their mule deer, and Dan's transmission went out. And they drove from Colorado home, couldn't get over like 40 miles an hour. So instead of like a 18-hour ride, it was like 36 hours.
Took twice as long.
Twice as long, and Dad was talking the whole way, and Dan couldn't play the tape because that was their agreement.
Yep.
And Dad was like, I learned more about Dan Burton on that trip
Yep.
because it was just the two of us talking,
Yep.
you know, and undivided attention of a busy guy.
Yeah, and the thing is like people are going, why are y'all talking about Dan Burton all the time? Why are you bringing him up? Why are you saying all this stuff about him? because that's the kind of guy he was, right?
And that's the kind of guy I want to be.
Yeah.
I don't want to be Dan Burton.
Nope.
But I want to be like Dan Burton.
Yeah,
Does that make
has
sense?
that kind of influence, impact, I guess is a better word, on people's lives. You know, that they look at that guy and they go, I want to do great things. I want to,
I want people people to be sad when I die.
Me too. And is that wrong?
No, it's because you want to do it right.
Yeah.
I don't want people when Harold Smith dies. I don't want people to say, "Well, I'm glad that blankety blank ain't here no more. Good to see him gone. Good riddance."
Yeah, well, we're to be at peace with all men if possible, right? And sometimes like a lot of people didn't get to know him, until later on.
Yeah.
People didn't for the first 10 or 15 years, I guess. I didn't know Danny Burton that well. You know what I'm saying?
He kept people in those early days.
I think that's some of the Vietnam stuff, because when them guys get off them choppers, 15 or 20 of them get off, or however many it was, I don't know. I'm not a Vietnam scholar, but 70 to 90% of them guys weren't around tomorrow. Yeah. And that's sad, but those guys are standoffish a little bit. They don't want to get to know somebody because they're going to be gone tomorrow.
Yep.
And I think that affected them a lot in their lives. But then when you do get to know a guy like that, and he is bigger than life, and people that don't know him don't understand that, which is okay. And
but when you die, if 1,800, 2,000 people show up at your funeral the day they bury you, not the visitation and that many people show up in a small town.
Yeah,
you were well known and well loved among your people.
Yep.
And I want to be the same way. Not just for I don't want to claim. I don't want people to pat me on the back. I just want to know that I lived in such a way that when I died, people were like, "Man, I'm gonna miss him."
Yep.
I'll
guarantee you that if he knew him for very long, he talked to him about Jesus.
Oh yeah.
That's the thing. He told them about Jesus. He was concerned with their soul. And he was concerned about their eternal destination. Yeah. And and really concerned. It wasn't play. Yeah. He wasn't playing at church. He wasn't playing. It was the real thing. Yep. And I want to be that way too. You know, and that's what happens when you learn from a guy like that. You try to mimic.
Yeah, my preaching style's nothing like Dan's.
Nope.
Neither is yours.
Nope.
We're not trying to be him, but I want people to learn from me the way I learned.
Yeah.
By letting the Bible be the Bible. This is true.
Yep.
We can dig in here. God will open the doors to us. We just need to drill in here and study and apply ourselves and ask God to open our eyes to see it. That's all stuff I learned. And then, it's hard to describe the guy we've been talking about, but he was not a politician. He's not a guy that went around shaking hands, slapping backs, was at all the school board meetings and all. That's
just
not
the opposite.
He was the opposite.
Yep.
But he was the kind of guy that if you met him, you're like, man, I like that guy.
Yep.
You just instantly liked him. And
he'd judge you who you were. I mean, he was a pretty good judge of character too.
Yeah.
And he knew where you were at. If you were working for him, I tell people this all the time. I mean, I was pretty hossy, right? I could get her done. I know I'm just an old fat guy now, but back in the day, I could get
in
it
your
done.
prime, yeah.
Yeah, I could go. And so what we thought was good was if you could swing a pick. Yeah. Right. I mean that was a good quality to have out on the swimming.
He's good with a pick, and he's got an eye for grade.
Shovel.
That's he's got an eye for grade.
Those were the things that got you somewhere in the company, right? And so Dan says, "Hey, I need you guys to dig this ditch, and you start down there. Jess, you start up here, and y'all meet in the middle." Well, the middle was I did 3/4 of the work, right? And I met the guy down there at the 3/4 of the work. And so he went down there and told that guy what a great job that he did, right? The guy
that did the quarter.
Yeah, he did 1/4 of the work. He went down there and told the guy, "Hey, what a great job you did." And this is just the kind of guy that he knew that's what that guy could do, right? Yeah. He actually probably exceeded what Dan thought he probably could have done. That's why he told him it was a good job.
Right.
Well, I'm like, of course, back in you think, well, that's been a long time ago. Well, I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Right. That's not very old,
Yeah, right.
So I don't know nothing. I'm thinking, that ain't right. I'm thinking, well, that's wrong. And so I said, man, he said, what's wrong, Jess? Because my countenance had fell.
Yeah,
right.
to get
And
Bible on
he
it.
goes, yeah, that's right. And he goes, I go, well, I said, you just told that guy what a great job he did. I said, I dug 3/4 of this ditch. It was probably 150 foot long, right? We're digging a backwash line. It had to be that deep,
Yeah.
And I said, I dug 3/4 of it. He dug 1/4, and you're patting him on the back, and I don't get a thank you. And he said, you just did what I knew you could do. I knew you could do that. This guy, I didn't think he was going to last through the 1/4 of a deal down there. He said, I was proud of him for making it down. But that's what he saw. He saw a guy that would try, and if that guy would try harder than what Dan's expectation was of him, Dan thought, okay, I can work with this guy. And I think that's something to do with the military or the Marine Corps or what, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he saw that guy at least had potential.
Right.
He didn't give up.
Right.
He didn't, he saw all those things.
Yeah,
That's the kind of guy he was.
And he was just a unique guy.
He was.
There was nobody else like him. He didn't imitate anybody else.
Whoop. Man, had a runaway there.
He was his own man. He was comfortable in his own skin.
Yep.
And
He was gruff. People were scared of him. He had these solid
if you knew
gray
him-
eyes. He had these gray eyes that look at you and
just stare right through you.
Yeah, exactly. And there was like sales guys that wouldn't go out there and talk to him.
Yeah, they scared of him.
They were scared. They actually physically
But
scared.
they had heard stories of him killing people with his bare hands. and
biting their
Vietnam.
ears off,
Yeah.
and nose off, and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. And but he wasn't like that.
No, if you knew him and he knew you, people would look at me and like, he's gonna kill you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, he loves me.
Yeah.
I can get away with this. Don't you try it.
No.
He'll kill you, but he won't kill me because I'm his friend.
Yeah.
And I could say stuff to him, and he'd smirk and grin and he'd give you that huff, and but that was that was the thing I liked about him.
Me too.
And
He got a phone call one time. And I don't know if you've probably heard me tell you this before, but he got a phone call one time from a salesman. Right, I know it's ended up being a Dan Burton deal here, but that's okay.
he's important to both of us.
He got a call from a guy trying to sell some kind of stock or something, right? Some kind of whatever. And Dan goes, well, I don't know why he did this, but he says, well, I'll give you 5 minutes. And he said, at the end of that 5 minutes, you got to give me 5 minutes. And so the guy did his spiel, song and dance, and Dan's listening to him. And the guy goes, well, Mr. Burton, what do you think? And he said, I think it's time for my 5 minutes. Right? And so Dan preaches the gospel to this guy, right? and I'm going to tell you, this guy was good at his job on the other end of the line, because when Dan got done, Dan goes, now what do you think? And he goes, well, Mr. Burton, while you were doing that, I was praying, and God told me that you need to buy this stock. So Dan said, well, okay, I'm not going to get nowhere here. And he said, you're not going to get nowhere, so we'll just part. And they hung up.
I quit working for you and went to work at the wire plant to get married. And I worked 3 on 4 off, 4 on 3 off. I was telling everybody that earlier. Well, Dan had sold his house across the road from you and bought a new property and was building a house on it. And he was moving out of the house he had lived, moving all of his stuff to a rental home. And I was getting married in a couple weeks, right? I don't know, I probably told you this, but I ain't told anybody else. You can sit and listen to it again. So he says, hey, Harold, he said, when's your next set of days off? Calls me, when's your next set of days off? I told him, he said, I want you to come help me move. I need somebody young, strong, help me, get some stuff done. Somebody can work. Well, he had a whole slew of people at Burton Pools that he could have just grabbed up, and he's like, I'll pay you. I'm just not asking for a favor. I want to hire you, give you some spending money. So I go over there, and we're moving like his gun safe. It is really stuff that
it's work.
Yeah, it's not something you just want a couple of high school kids to do. You need somebody who's willing to work and got a back to do it.
He ain't gonna let go on you.
Yeah,
and smush you.
Yeah, and so we're moving this stuff in a stock trailer, and then we're driving to this rental house he's got, and we're rolling everything in there and putting it. It's just temporary, And so he said, I need you for 2 days. I said, okay. So the first day we did all this work, and we'd load that stock trailer full of stuff, and then we'd get in the truck, and he'd start telling me about money. Now, look, you get married now. You don't need to run out there and get you a bunch of debt. You don't need new furniture. You don't need. He's giving me all this financial advice. I'm like, okay, yeah, okay. So it's just like, I was like, at the end of that first day, I think Dan just trying to give me some, just some advice for, when I get married. Day 2 was sex ed day.
Yep.
I got in the truck. We loaded that first trailer up, and I got in the truck, and he said, your wife's got a certain set of needs, and you do too. And I was like, what in the world? He starts telling me.
Got pretty graphic,
probably.
Graphic
detail. This is how you need to take care of your wife. This is important. And I'm sitting there, and I mean, here I am. I'm 20 years old. I'm staring straight out the windshield. I got like a 45-year-old or 40-year-old man next to me telling me how to have.
He was serious.
Yeah. And I'd look ahead, and he'd stop every once in a while and go, I'm telling you this because it's important. This is important. A lot of marriages is ruined right here.
Yep.
And I said, I understand, Dan. And I was like.
You didn't.
Yeah, I was like, let's talk about hunting,
Yeah.
And no. So I got in the truck on that second load, and I said, hey, tell me about that, buffalo you shot up there. And he's like, no, I'm not talking about that. He went right back in where he left off.
That's exactly right.
But
he was on a mission.
He had an agenda. He's like, I love this guy. He's fixing to get married. He thinks he knows what he's doing. He doesn't. I've been there. And he told me a lot of important things that I needed to know. Embarrassing on his part and mine.
Yep.
But he was willing to do that.
He was.
And I appreciated him even more, even though it was awkward. Mm-hmm. I was like,
later on for sure.
Yeah. I was like, this guy, he could have got anybody to come work for him.
Yep.
He could have,
He had a lot of studs in there.
Yeah, there was a lot. There was guys stronger than me, bigger than me, available other days than me.
He's got them working for him. He could have hired crews to come do that.
Yeah, it wasn't like he needs somebody to help him move. He could have just paid somebody and had it done. He was looking for an opportunity to put me one-on-one in the cab with him.
And help you.
And help me.
Yep.
And he paid me well.
And he done that for a lot of people.
He did it for more than just me.
And that's what he allowed us to do out in the on the job site. Like, he wanted us to be that for them people. He wanted us to teach those kids those kind of things. I've had parents who had sent their kids to work there at the end of the summer, that their moms and dads come and hug my neck
for teaching them how to work,
to be a man,
teaching them morals,
how to be a man,
manhood.
Yep, and to not gripe, and to know how good they got it at home.
Yeah,
not paying any bills.
Yeah,
not all they have to do is take out the trash or mow the yard every now and then. And they're not paying rent, they're not paying electric bills, they're not paying any of those things. And you learn those things and you teach them to those youngsters. And then they become better men because of that, and I think that's part of the dance.
I remember another guy that worked with us when I worked for you, and he wanted to make what I was making, which was like, I don't remember, $750. It was something like that. Yeah. He was making like $725.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, I want to make $750 like Harold makes. And you said, well, show up every day for a week, and I'll pay you $750 that week.
Yep.
If you're late, I'll pay you $725 for the week.
Yep.
Deal, because I was showing up every day. I didn't when we first started, but you broke me, And so I learned, hey, man, we got to be here at this time or I drive to the job, know? So I caught on. So anyways, so we'd be in the truck, and he's on time. He's waiting on us. And I thought, hey, man, and you know, in your mind, hey, this extra quarter, an hour's worth it if the guy's here and we don't have to wait on him and all this
stuff. I'm having to pay a guy to sit here and wait on him.
Yeah, and so anyways, I remember like Friday morning, we were there, we were looking at our watches, and I was like, crap, if he's late today, he loses the quarter an hour for the whole, you could get a can of snuff for a quarter.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking every hour, he's losing a can of snuff for the whole week. And we was sitting there, and he come in late, and I was like, oh my goodness, man. It was just to me, I was thinking, man, that's like, what is it like? Say we work 10-hour days. I'm like, he lost $250 a day for 5 days.
Yep.
Which really wasn't a whole lot of money, But what did you teach him?
Be on time.
You taught him responsibility, and
Yep.
there's a reason why somebody makes more than you. It's because they're responsible.
And they'd show up every day.
And if you'd be responsible, you'd make what they make. And that
Every
was a
day of the
lesson.
week.
Yeah, that was a lesson I learned working for you.
Yep.
And
That's when the bus pulls out. That's what you learn, that, hey, everybody's there and ready to go. I mean, it's the same thing in our churches. I like to have fellowship as much as everybody. I tell people that, hey, church starts at 11,
yeah,
but we don't get started till about 11:15, 11:20,
yeah,
right? I believe fellowship is an important part of our service. And I know we eat afterwards, but getting to know somebody and having a conversation with people when they come in, you don't just come in, sit down, and sing a couple songs and get up and leave. You don't know nothing about nobody.
No.
But if you get there at 11 o'clock, which I normally am there a lot earlier than that.
right,
And I've got guys that are in there cooking and laughing and having a
Right.
good time in there, right? They get to know each other, and then the other people start coming in, and you get to come in there and you get to shoot the breeze with somebody. Mm-hmm. Guess what? You know about their life.
yeah,
You know about what their struggles are.
Yeah.
You know about how to pray for that person. Hey, he's going through some stuff. I'm going to be praying for this guy for strength, for patience to endure, for,
Sure.
for family stuff going on in
Sure.
their family, whatever, And so I think that's an important thing. Well, guess what? When you're a kid, it's important to show up, and to learn the importance of showing up. Mm-hmm. And anybody that knows me knows I'm pretty steady. I don't like change a lot, but you can count on me. Like if I say I'm going to be there,
you're going to be there.
I'm going to be there, and they can count on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important in a pastor, but it's also important as a man, right? My wife knows she can count on me.
Yep.
Maybe not tonight, because
You texted her
I
before we
did.
got started.
I
and said,
did.
"Hey,
She
we're
knew
fixing-"
what was going on.
Yeah.
But it's important that you know these things, and when you teach them teach that to young people, you can't be mean about it. But you got lots of you'll have lots of stories like that about a lot of different young men.
Yeah,
And but like I've got guys that still have their nicknames.
yeah,
They put them on license plates and put them on the front
that
of
they
their
got
cars
working for
and-
you, yeah.
Yeah, that they got working
Yeah.
when we was kid, And I was a kid then too, People don't realize,
You started there when you were what, 20?
21 years old,
21.
about 21, 22, somewhere in there. I was just a kid too.
Yeah.
Of course I'd been married since I was 19, so I was I had 2 years. My son had just been born when I got a job there. I was working, making, it was under $100 a week when I first started working there.
Right.
And the backhoe man got me. My backhoe man was my next door neighbor,
James Gilbert.
Yeah, I went to school with his son, Johnny.
Yeah.
And we used to go smoke cigarettes down in the, when we was stupid kids, doing stuff, you'd think you was tough and all that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got a job because of him. He says, hey, call these guys. And I had just got married, just got saved, and I got to start doing that. But I was just a kid. I didn't know nothing, but I'd been working since I was 13.
Yeah.
Right, for other people, not just my dad, not mowing the yard, not doing that, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm talking had a job, where people would pay me after I got done.
Right.
You know what I mean? So hauling hay, doing all different things. And I was
Sure.
always a big kid, so I was able to do those kind of things. And so what I learned is these men, they're not going to wait around on you because you're just a kid.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing you got to teach them. You got to teach them, teach people that they got to show up. Mm-hmm. And that's the first thing you got to do for anything
Yeah.
is show up.
You
know?
know, another thing I think I learned working, I wouldn't say I learned it from you so much, but just working in the job was learning how to take kidding.
Yep.
You know, I've been kidded my whole life. My dad was
You
a
were
cut
good
up,
at it.
and I was good at throwing it back. You know, somebody could kid around that, well, this is great. I was on it too. But, you mentioned James Gilbert telling you to go down there and get a job. Oh, James, he ran the backhoe and dug the pools the whole time I worked for you at Burton's. And James, I mean, he just jawing, running his mouth the whole time, and get down in there, boy, hurry up! I'm tired of waiting. This thing don't run for free. You know, I need grease for this thing, and he's all the time saying stuff, and
He didn't mean nothing by it.
No, he's just the way he talked.
Yeah.
You know, and
He did that because he liked you.
he liked you. Yeah, if he didn't, I've been on jobs where he didn't like him, and he didn't say nothing. He sat there quiet, and I'm like, okay, he likes me. You know, and I was thinking about Larry Ellis, old dump truck driver,
Yep.
and old low boy.
Yep.
And anyways, I would always think about him coming in, cutting up and kidding and joking, and I was like, you know, you don't have to be at a dead end, boring, no fun, nobody talks job. And I've been on places where it was that way, and I said, look, it's not going to be that way. I'm here.
It's terrible. when
Yeah,
it's like that.
I'm not going to let that go on. I'm going to take control. You know, I'm going to do my part. And so,
It's not fun.
well, what I
I mean, how
learned
can work be
everywhere I've
fun?
worked, they were like, man, when you left, it just wasn't no fun anymore.
exactly?
You know, and I was like, well, good. That's what I wanted
Yep.
it to be.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I can remember Larry getting on the CB radio
Yep.
before daylight. Where are y'all at?
Yeah.
You know, I'm out of coffee or something like that, or meet me here. And we were just, it was fun. We wasn't even on the job yet. We was having fun and cutting up and joking and
that's what made the day go. Because
yeah.
it was a terrible, nasty job.
yeah, it
You
was
know,
not
you
a
can
fun
say
job.
it's not a fun job, and it's physical and it's laborsome.
And if you've been on the job with
And it's
people,
hot.
yeah, but if you've been on that same job with people that don't know how to have fun,
Yeah, it's a
that is a long day. Because I'm like, well,
It's worse.
I've built pools for Jesse. He works hard. I can work for anybody.
Yep.
And then you go to work for some other crew, just like one day, they don't laugh, they don't joke. You're like, man, it's
I'm glad I'm where I'm at. Me too. I'm the same. I'm glad Harold's coming today. You know, at least it'll go by faster.
Yeah.
I might not like what I'm doing, but guess what? At least
Well,
it'll be fun.
that I really think.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that
God
applies.
gave us that camaraderie, I believe. He gave us those where we can kind of goof around. Now, I've seen it go too far where people
Yeah.
got mad at each other and
Sure,
stuff for goofing off.
sure.
But you got to kind of watch what you're doing sometimes, and you know. But I'm with you. I enjoyed that aspect of our relationship, but I had that with a lot of guys that I worked with. You know,
Oh, yeah.
because you try to foster that because as a leader or a boss, that makes your job a lot easier.
Yeah, I learned
Yeah.
that. I mean,
Yep.
it wasn't that I didn't know how to cut up and joke, but I was like, man, this makes the job a whole lot better.
And you
know?
don't lose your guys. You know
Yeah.
what happens is those guys will find them another job.
Yeah,
You know, that's why when you get a guy, he's emotional when he left,
yeah,
right? Is because he's had a great job here.
Yeah.
You know, and I was emotional when you left too.
yeah. I liked
Yeah.
working for you,
Yeah,
man.
it
I
was
was like,
awesome.
yeah,
It was one of the good times I had, you know. Of course, we always tell each other, you know, you say I'm not the best boss you ever had, but and I always tell you you're not the best employee I've ever had, but you were a good. And we had, I'll tell you this, we probably had the most fun,
oh yeah.
you know, that I had out of any of my guys.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
I remember we built that keyhole shaped pool. And for those of you that don't know, a keyhole is like a skeleton keyhole. You got a big round circle, and then you got a little square box that comes off the bottom, like you'd slide a skeleton.
It was weird.
Skeleton key into, you know. And so where the diving board was kind of a hexagon or an octagon, if you will. And then there was this shallow end that come off toward the house.
You know,
So you had to pour this sloped wall on that round end. So it was like just a big old round hole with a sloped wall. And the whole time we were building it, I was like, I wonder if I could run down this shallow end and then just like run like on the wall all the way around the circle. If I don't stop, we were
like
talking
a racetrack.
Yeah, we were talking like physics. You know, if I
Yeah.
run fast enough, my center of gravity will be on the wall. And
It'll
so
hold me there.
yeah, so the whole time we built that pool, and then one day I was like, all right, I had like a good pair of tennis shoes on or
gonna do
something. I said, I'm running a lap, and I took off running and ran around that thing and ran back, and we was laughing about
made
that. But I remember stuff like, you know, billy goats.
Yep.
On jobs, the wind would change. I'm like, it's blowing out of the east. I can smell that billy goat, you
Yep.
know, and just
Different stuff.
different stuff.
That makes the day go good. Grape slush when you got real hot.
Yeah, get brain freeze.
Get us get us a grape Slurpee down to 7-Eleven or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so we had good times and it was fun, but there was a lot of stuff we learned. you learn stuff, I learn stuff, and that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's a give and take when you're friends, and I learned that, working at lots of places, not just at the place I worked for 30 years. I was there probably 28, going on 29, when I was there. And but you learn that there's a lot of give and take, and you can't just be one way.
Yeah.
Or people don't like you, And sometimes, there's a time when you're working when you got to be the boss.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Because that's your job. That's how you get paid. That's how your family's fed. That's how you send them to school.
It wasn't all just fun and games every day, just laughing and joking.
Sometimes you got a boss.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not fun.
Yeah.
But if they know that going in, and they know that when this part's over, it'll be fun and games again. That means everybody pulls and gets it done, and everything's good. I think a person can learn a lot when you toll in the ditch with somebody else.
Yeah.
Learn a lot about them, and I think that's good.
I think physical labor's good.
Yep. When you're young.
Well, you got to keep doing it.
You do.
When you quit doing it is when you can't do it no more.
Yeah.
I learned that when you went out on your own and you called me and you said, "Hey man, I need a hand.
Yep.
I got this great big old liner. I just need a guy to come help me."
Yep.
And I was like, I could.
I hadn't been doing it.
And I was like
I was
Toby
wore
Keith.
out.
Yeah, I'm not as good as I once was, but
Yeah.
I'm as good once as I ever was.
Yeah.
We'll go hang this big old liner together. Me and Jess, just like old times.
Jess, he's a stud. He can
Yeah.
get it done. I wasn't.
Yeah, well, I wasn't either.
Yeah.
And so I crawled down in that hole with you, and
We like to died.
it was a horrible job. It was a horrible built pool. It was a horrible everything.
Yeah.
And
I'm never doing this again.
yeah, my muscles were cramped up. I was all dehydrated. I wasn't used to crawling around on my hands and knees anymore. And I mean, I was dying.
Yep.
But what I took away from that was I got to get out of this office.
Yep.
I either need to get a chainsaw and start cutting some wood.
Yep.
I need some kind of physical activity to get me back out.
You gotta move.
Yeah. I'm not going to a gym. I'm not going to go
You
sit.
might not do what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I don't blame you, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't ever want to do that again either. Because I got called to come do that job again, and I told them no.
No.
Yeah, and because it was huge, and but you got to keep moving. If you don't keep moving, then you lose what you do have.
And being a pastor, if you're out there and you're a pastor, or maybe you're not a pastor, you got an office job, a desk job, maybe you got a job where you do a lot of just riding and talking, and that's what I did. You better find some kind of physical activity that you can do regularly. Keep them joints moving, keep them muscles moving, because I lost a lot
Yep.
in a few years of pastoring. I lost a lot.
Yep.
And
I did when I went into management, and
Yeah.
all I did was ride around, point my finger. Now, I kept my rubber boots in the truck, and I carried my trowels with me for the first 3 or 4 or 5 years, and I would jump in there and help the guys, and I did that so they would know that, hey, this guy can do it.
he can still do it.
Yeah, and and you jump in there when they're in a tight spot. I mean, you get out there, when it's 100 degrees in Arkansas and the humidity's up there, bad high.
Yeah, you're not going to pour 16 yards of concrete
And
if you
you
ain't
got
used
guys
to
in
it.
the bottom of a hole,
Yeah.
and they've just thrown some grout walls on there, and they're troweling it off, and they see a guy jump off in there with some rubber boots, knows what he's doing. I'm telling you, you're like the guy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like, so you jump in there and you help them, and they go,
And you know what to do. You're not in the way.
Yeah.
You're not the boss in there that's in the way. You're a guy that
slowing
knows.
them down.
Yeah.
You're speeding them up. You
Yeah.
actually helped them, and they go, okay, I'm working for a guy who knows what he's doing.
That's a good point.
And so you gotta prove that to a lot of the new guys. They haven't known you for
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah, they don't know the old guy that
No.
used to get out and do it.
And the thing about it is like I can do that on one. But what they didn't understand is that I went home and like died,
Yeah.
right, and slept for like, and hurt for 3 days afterwards.
Yeah. And,
So,
take that full circle back to Danny Burton again. That when I helped him move, the two of us were picking up this gigantic Browning safe on a dolly that the welds and stuff were cracking on. And I mean, when we picked that thing up and rolled it back, we had a hold of it. We was rolling it off that. I could hear joints and muscles popping and cracking, and he's over there going, I was like, man, you all right? I'm fine. And I'm like, you don't sound fine. I'm fine. And
he wouldn't have told you if he wasn't.
no, but it was killing him.
Oh yeah.
And that next day, he didn't do nothing.
He was hurt.
He was hurt.
Yeah.
But he wasn't going to let me know that. You know, he was going to show me
he
I'm
like
still.
broke his back
Yeah.
in the military. And they
Yeah.
told him he'd never walk again.
Yeah.
He'll never be able to do a job, not walk, but they told him he'd never be able to do a job. And he told them he was going to ride bulls. And they wouldn't let him out till he told them he wasn't going to do nothing. So finally he told them he wasn't going to do nothing. Then you know what he did? He went and rode bulls. Yeah. And so that's just another who he was. He could put his mind to something and just would do it,
But I think there's something in, not a pride thing, but as much as it is I don't know the right word to use here.
drive.
There's a drive there that I think we ought to have. We ought to be willing to go, look, this is going to hurt. This is not going to be fun,
Nope.
but I'm going to dig down. I'm going to do it. I'm going to show them I can do it. And I'm going to, not because you want to try to prove you're something,
Nope.
as much as you just want
To yourself even.
To yourself, yeah.
But he did that in the ministry too, and that's the thing, and that's what we kind of take about. We see him, he's bigger than life, all the things that we've always already said, but he did that in the ministry too.
Yeah.
Whatever people said, well, you can't do that. Well, he would do it.
If he
You know what I'm
committed
saying?
himself to something, he
It
tried at that or did that until he died.
He figured a way out to do it,
Yeah.
and it might not have been the way he first tried to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, he the thing about that I learned from them guys is, hey, it's okay to take a swing at the fence.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's all right to mess up on your way to doing something right.
Right.
Because you learn something out of it.
I say it
or
like
whatever.
this. The best way to get something done is just to load your wagon up and then start trying to pull it.
Get after it.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do it, you got to start somewhere, right? And that's what I learned from those guys is they weren't scared to let a guy, if they didn't know and you didn't know, but they had confidence that you knew better than they did maybe or whatever, or they were willing, they would go, okay, you do it. And you're like, but it's going to cost you money. That's okay. You do it. And, I mean, we built some stuff that had never been built the way it was built. I mean, we did stuff that nobody else had done.
Yeah.
I've been in national pool magazines, and stuff like that. I've taught classes on stuff for international pool companies and different things
Right.
like that. I'm an old hillbilly, but I've traveled all over the world in the swimming pool business.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And God has blessed my life because I met some Christian guys in the swimming pool business.
Yeah,
and they were good guys.
And I would say this. I mean, we're pushing into 2 hours, and you've been sitting here a while. This is what I want to. This is one of the things I want to say. I think, I didn't intend to get on here and talk about Danny Burton as much as we did, but he's influential for both of
He
us.
is.
And
And maybe we'll do it again sometime. Talk about some different stuff.
talk about throwing praying mantis on my
Yeah.
face and
Swat and wasp.
and all that stuff. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can tell those stories. That's what I thought we were going to do. But since we're talking about Danny Burton, this is what I'd like to say. I've worked in the largest businesses in their genre. I don't know. That's not the right word. In their industry, okay? Burton Pools was the largest vinyl liner swimming pool builder in the world when I worked for them. All right, the kind of pools they built, there wasn't nobody as big as they were. I left there and went to work for Beckart Steel Wire, the largest wire producer in the world. There was nobody even close to Beckart. I left Beckart and went to Frito-Lay, which was owned by Pepsi-Cola, and at the time, PepsiCo was the second largest employer in America, second only to the federal government. And then I left there and went to work with South Central Pool Supply, the largest wholesale pool distributor and pool products distributor in the world. So I've sat in corporate business meetings. I've sat and I've heard it come down from the office. I've sat and listened to all these reports and all these things. If you have an opportunity to work for an independent Christian business, you're way, way, way better off than making a little extra money in a corporation. Even if it don't work out, even if they let you go, even if over time you end up, going out on your own, the time of working for godly people far outweighs anything you pick up in the corporate world. It does. There's just something about working for people that have the same morals and values that you do.
Yeah, and the thing is they treat you good.
Yeah.
You know, they treat you like a Christian would treat another Christian.
Yeah.
You know,
and I'm talking about real Christians here.
Yeah.
And not people like, oh, I believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
And then cheat on,
They expect you to work.
Yeah.
If you don't work, you don't eat.
Right. But
but if you do,
having somebody with a moral compass,
yep.
having somebody with a belief in God and a God-given command to love their fellow man like they love themselves,
Yeah, and you go to them with a problem, guess what? It gets fixed. You're not fired.
Yeah.
The problem gets fixed. If you're a good guy, they're a good guy.
They've experienced mercy and grace, and they tend to show some.
They do. And those things work out good. And
you can't take advantage of them. But look, when I left the swimming pool company, the wholesale company, to start preaching, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I went and bought a lawnmower, and I was just going to mow grass and preach whenever I could. Well, I preached all the time. But I didn't have customer number one. I bought a lawnmower, and I was like, well, who do I know that's got a business? And so I went down there, and I'm going to tell you what, those same guys that I've known all along, I said, y'all got anything you need mowed? They were like, yeah, mow this. And I was like, well, y'all probably already got somebody. No, we don't. We got you. I don't know if they had somebody. I don't know if they fired him. I don't know, but they hired me.
Yeah.
And then they said, hey, you got any spare time? We got other stuff, And those same men, what they were doing, I didn't realize it initially, but I realized it over time. They realized that I was trying to serve the Lord and to begin to preach and serve churches. And they said, look, here's a guy that we can put some time in. We can give him a job. We can put him to work. And they got me. They didn't give me a handout. They gave me a job in a difficult time financially and got me through and created work for me.
Yep.
Corporations don't do that.
Because they realize that, hey, he's a Christian. And first off, we should do those things for each other. We should do those things for one another as Christians so that the outside world goes, hey, them guys got something we don't have.
Right.
They see those things happen.
Right.
And, man, they take care of each other.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be. That's not a lot the way it is now. What you got now is you've got the people in the church want to take care of the people outside the church. And, hey, I get that. And there's a place for that, too. Don't get me wrong. Right? There's a place for that. But if there's no benefit to being a member, why become a member, right? You don't see that. And I know, and I'm not saying that for physical reasons or whatever, but membership does have its privileges. Yeah. And we've talked about that some before, but we should treat other Christians really, really good. Yeah. And towards one another especially. That way people who look at us go, man, them guys, they take care of each other. Yeah. They have a bond deeper than the Mason's Lodge. Exactly. And we should. Yeah, and it's not just financial. I'm talking about, and the thing is that's what when I went to work for them guys, I saw that. I helped 4 guys build their houses. I didn't charge them a dime, right? I took out of my time. Yeah. Right? And back then I had no money. Yeah. Right? I mean I'm people say, well, blah 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 or whatever. I didn't have no money. And I took that job, and I worked twice as many hours, but I doubled my pay. Yeah. But I was working, 60 hours, no OT, working by the piece job. But my bring home pay was twice as much as I would have made working at the table factory. Yeah, right. In a week's time. Yeah. Right? And so, because I needed that to start making some money, paying some bills, doing some stuff, right? Well, I worked for these guys during that time, right? And I helped build houses, and for these guys. One of them was for one of my bosses, Keith, and then Dan built 2 houses, and of course, he was the one building them anyway, and so I went go help him. And then David, he built the house, and I went and helped him build on his house too as well. And the thing about it is when you work for a Christian company, when you work for Christian guys, and I finally got up in the company, I become crew leader, I started making some more money, I'm trying to buy a better house. I'm living in a house that's got cardboard doors on it, right? Painted cardboard. They're 2x2s, painted cardboard with a little hook that hooks the end. Yeah. That's the doors on my inside of my house, right? I got a little shower in there, and I'm renting from the trash man for $100 a month, and there's cockroaches everywhere, and we've got to spray every other week, kill cockroaches and stuff. I don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. You know what I'm saying? But then I start making some money. I get a bonus, right? So I said, what do I need to do with this bonus? Dan says, you need to buy some land. He said, then you need to build a house, right? He goes, I just happen to have some land right out here. And he knew how much I made. He knew how much my bonus was. And he said, that's how much it's going to cost you for 5 acres.
Yeah.
And so I gave him the money back, right? And at that time, land was going for about twice that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, and he said, and then what you do is you go down and you get a construction loan on it. And so his brother, who I helped build a house, he comes and helps me get my construction loan. He helps me get my stuff settled with the bank, because that's what he did.
Yeah, he's
They were
the
two different
financial
guys.
side.
Yeah, so he comes and helps me get my loan from them on just the construction part, get me started. Dan we had drawed my house out on a grocery sack, right, like an IGA grocery. He said, "This is what I think it ought to look like. It's about this wide here. This is." What do you think? And I said, "I think it's awesome, right? You know."
Yeah.
And I don't know nothing. You know, I just know I went and helped him a few times, right? And so then the guy I helped build a house comes over. Danny comes over. A guy I worked with pouring concrete with that I'd helped before do some stuff. He comes over and helps me pour my concrete. They do it. They all jump in. I've helped them. They come help me. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
You know, and then so when you see that from the inside, you get to work at a company like that where they come help you and those things kind of work. I'm telling you, you go, okay, these guys are the real deal.
They're real.
These are the real deal.
You know,
They just didn't use me up as a stupid
The dumb-
22-year-old
yeah.
kid, you know.
I look back and I've kicked myself probably a dozen times over the years, but the 10 acres next to you,
Yeah,
Dan offered to sell me that.
yeah,
And he gave me a price. And I thought, boy, that's a lot of money. And I was like, but that don't seem like it. It's not high, you
No.
know. And he gave me this price. And he said, if you want to live out here, he said, I'll sell you this 10 acres. It was cleared.
Yeah.
He had already cleared it all off. He said,
Yeah.
this is what it is, and this is what I'll take for it. And I was like, I don't know, man.
he was wanting a good neighbor
Yeah, well,
and help you.
what that's worth today,
Yeah,
even I knew what it was worth then, and it wasn't
Yeah.
what he was. It was about half
Yep.
of what it was worth. He
Yep.
was trying to help me
He
get
was.
10 acres, and
and he'd get him a good neighbor.
yeah. Well, but
He's
you're
gonna sell
right.
it anyway.
But what back to
Well,
what
he's
I
gonna
was
help you.
saying, corporations don't do that for
Nope.
their people. Big business doesn't do that for their
Nope.
people. You know, my dad worked for Pepsi Cola for 20 some odd years.
And they loved him.
They loved him. He did a great job. He was tops of tops, but he was 2 bad years away from being terminated. You know,
Yeah.
you're always just there's no loyalty there,
No,
and so
they can't afford to.
no, they're accountable to shareholders.
Yep.
And that's what I was saying. When I've worked for these big corporations, I was a number, you know. And yeah, I made them a lot of money. I made them when I got into management and to sales. You know, I could show them, here's my value to you, and that's great. But there was no loyalty there.
No.
And
And I messed up in my job. I mean, I'm not perfect, and I'm
Sure.
sure I messed up. I'm sure I cost them money. I feel like I made them more money than I lost them for sure, or I probably wouldn't have been there either. You know, but you know, these guys were good to me,
Yeah.
and I when I get a chance to talk about them, I never talk bad about them, and you know, and when we parted ways, we parted on good terms. I feel like they were good terms, you know, as much as they can be. I thought I'd die there, you know, but that's not what God had.
That's not what
That's
God
not what God
had
had
for
for
you.
me.
Yep.
And so He moved me out because I mean, you know, pressure will do that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about, and that's what your dad likes to say a lot. He said, pressure moves stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Pain makes a transition, and pressure moves things.
pressure move things. And so when you get that pain and you start getting that pressure, guess what happens? You make a move. And that's kind of what happened. But we left on good terms. And I mean, I like when people say stuff, I said, man, I never talk bad about them. You know, I always talk good about them.
Yeah, and when
You
you're
know?
a big company like that, you do have to make hard decisions, and not everybody's a winner. And
No.
yeah, it's easy to go, man, I don't like them guys,
Yeah.
you know. But really, when I back up and look,
Yep.
they've helped a lot of people
Bunch.
over the years. They've put a lot of people in the swimming pool business.
They have.
Most of their competitors
Yep.
were their employees that they've trained.
Yep.
And I just, I don't know. I know a lot of people.
It's become a love fest for the Burton boys. But I'm telling you that there's a reason for that. And
Yeah.
it's because they had good Christian values, and they were good to their people.
Yeah.
And they still are. And I think they might have kind of fell away from that a little bit, but now they're back on their way to. I think they're doing a really good job, and I'm proud, and I'm still glad that I work there. You know.
Yeah, I am too. And
yeah.
No company's perfect, and you're never going to work for anybody and be happy about every decision that's ever been made.
Yep.
But when I look back at my life and I look at the places I've worked, I really wish I'd just worked for some local Christian businessmen. I really do.
Yep.
You know, I ultimately ended up working for the Lord Jesus Christ and shepherding one of his churches. But if I were a young man, I wouldn't shy away from a local Christian company, even if the company goes under and fails. I learned so much in those days that I didn't pick up in the corporate world. I didn't pick that up sitting in a sales meeting in Nashville. You know, you only pick that stuff up working for,
Well, you get hard work and ethic that you can develop. I mean, people don't realize that, hey, that's something you can develop. It's not like now some people hard work's using their brain. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to be derogatory. Hey, that's what they're designed to do. They're smart. And, you get this guy but
they still got to apply themselves.
Yeah, you got like this Elon Musk guy. He's like a genius guy, right? He uses his now. Could I outpick him? Right?
Yeah.
Like that one guy? Yeah, I probably could by a good shot, you know. But could I outsmart him? No. And God makes us different, you know.
Successful men like him are not working 40 hours a week and then sitting on the couch watching TV for 8 hours a day.
But they won't be scared to hire a guy like me.
Yeah.
Because I do what I do good. That's right. And then the thing is, we talk about Danny Burton, but, David, I learned a lot from David too. And I appreciate him as a human, but as a fellow Christian too. That I mean, he taught me a lot of stuff too.
Yeah, me too.
About selling and and when you get out on your own, you got to do a little bit of that. Guess what? I didn't know how much of that rubbed off.
Yeah.
And I realize now that that like while everybody might have loved Danny because of who man. That kind of thing.
Yeah, the man's man guy.
But you had the front guy out there who was taking a swing for the fence, too. They made a complete guy.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
One guy, the sales-minded, business-minded, bank-minded, the other guy leading a team of people to work.
Exactly.
And then crews of people to work.
Yep. Yeah, leader of men.
Yeah.
And I think David's actually writing a book about Danny now and wants to know about stuff, and I think that's what it's called, just a leader of men. Yeah. And it's going to tell a lot of these stories, but I think it's pretty interesting. And I like to reminisce.
I do too.
About.
I'm glad we did.
Me too.
That was a good one.
So,
is there anything else you want to say before we take off?
I don't know what it'd be. I thank you for letting me come and talk. Maybe I'll get to do it again.
Well,
maybe we'll get us a subject.
It'll be next winter because being in the pool business, you're fixing to get busy.
Well, I have slowed down a little.
Yeah.
And I don't mind.
Let's do it in the summer when it's not so cold in the office.
That sounds good.
We're not sitting in front of 2 space heaters.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Jess, thanks for coming on.
All right, brother. Thank you.
You guys for listening. If you made it this far, you're probably a Backwoods Baptist, and I'll see you somewhere in the backwoods.